This is Writers' Voices with Monica and Caroline. I am your host, Monica Hadley. Caroline is not able to join us today, but we do have a most interesting book and author with us today, Benjamin Ludwig, who is a lifelong teacher of English and writing. He lives in New Hampshire with his family. Shortly after he and his wife married, they became foster parents and adopted a teenager with autism. Ginny Moon is his first novel, which was inspired in part by his conversations with other parents at Special Olympics basketball practices. And the title of this novel is Ginny Moon. It is, what can I say? It's a book that once I started reading, I couldn't put down. And there's not all that many books that I would say that about. So welcome to Writers' Voices, Benjamin.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Monica.
So you have been a teacher of writing. You hold an MFA in writing. Had you published prior to Ginny Moon? I know this is your first novel, but had you published other types of work?
Yeah, just some small reviews, some small short stories, and a few articles here and there, and a very teeny tiny novella. But this is my first real book, as they say.
Did you always want to be a novelist?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Since I've been writing, I like to tell people since fourth grade. In various drawers and on hard drives, I've got anywhere between 12 to 15 novels, all unpublished, all absolutely horrid. But they're out there.
Well, the way you learn to be a good writer is by being a bad writer first, right?
Yeah, I think there's an awful lot of truth to that. I say those early books those early novels, I should say, were horrible, but I loved them to death because you learn so much through them. Just the act of starting on page 1 and getting all the way through to page 300, whatever, gives you so much insight into how a story is really crafted.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, when you started writing Ginny Moon, did you know that this was going to be the one that could come out of the drawer, off the computer, onto the published page?
Yes, I did. It was a very strange experience. I had just come home from my daughter's Special Olympics basketball practice. It was 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, and I got home and I had this voice just ringing in my ears. And it wasn't my daughter's voice, and it wasn't the voice of any of the athletes or people I'd just spoken with at the gymnasium, but it was this compelling, driving, insistent voice. And I started writing from its perspective, and once I started, I really couldn't stop. And that, of course, was Ginny's voice that I was writing from. And she wrote probably half the novel for me, I like to say.
It's interesting that you say that, because when I was thinking about the book this morning and thinking about, what I wanted to talk about, voice is the first thing that came to my mind. The voice, I mean, we hear, anyone who's taken writing classes or heard writers speak, even English class back in high school, there's a lot of reference to voice and its importance, particularly in fiction. But often it's hard to really define what that means. I think with Ginny, it's like so much a part of the book. I actually, what I was thinking I would say is that when teachers talk about voice in teaching writing in the future, I think they're going to use Ginny Moon as an example.
Believe me, I would love that, Monica.
So we're talking about voice and how clearly this voice came to you. Do you have any explanation for that?
Well, honestly, it was a very mysterious process, and if I only focus on that moment when the voice did come to me, which was such a bizarre thing, then no, I don't have an explanation. But I'm not quite willing to say it was a miracle. It just came to me out of the blue. I mean, my wife and I are foster parents. We adopted a young lady with autism in 2009, and she had been living with us all that time. So about 4 years before I even started writing the book. That, combined with having taught public school for quite a while and having so many kids on the spectrum and kids with all sorts of intellectual disabilities in my classes, I think it just provided really this richness of sort of linguistic scaffolding that let my subconscious put the voice together. But when it really arrived, it absolutely arrived, out of the blue, out of the dark, in that mysterious way.
Now, does your daughter see any of herself in Ginny Moon?
Well, she's read the book, and excuse me, she's read the book, and she sees a few small similarities, which is really all there is. Ginny is this intense, desperate, driven person who will break all sorts of rules to get what she's after, because she has to. It's a matter of life and death. And our daughter is this really sweet, innocent, wonderful person who happens to also be on the spectrum. She noticed that Ginny was on the spectrum like she was. Our daughter understands that she is on the autism spectrum. She also recognized that Ginny loves Michael Jackson like she does. But that's really where the similarities stop. In fact, when our daughter read the book, one of the first things she said to me was, "Dad, I don't like Ginny." And I said, "Well, why not?" "She likes Michael Jackson just like you do." And she said, "Yeah, but, Ginny breaks rules."
Oh.
Okay. And that was great. What better answer could a dad hope for?
Yeah, really.
Don't break any rules, honey.
Now, how much of you is in the father in this book?
A small slice. The truth about being a novelist is that you, as the author, you are every single character. I'm as much the father as I am the mother, as I am the guidance counselor, as I am Ginny herself. I really have no choice but to become every single one of those perspectives, each in turn, which is a wonderfully therapeutic process, by the way. Being able to argue very strongly as a character for one particular idea or decision, and then take the opposite standpoint and really have to defend it. It's just kind of like being in debate club all over again.
Now, the father, Brian, in this book is a very important role. He seems to has a close relationship with Ginny, or as close as anybody can, and the mother in this book is not quite as likable as the father. How does your wife feel about that?
I mean, without giving too much away, at the very beginning of the book, when we first meet Ginny, she makes some statements about her forever mom. That's what kids in the foster care system call their adoptive parents, their forever mom and their forever dad. But Ginny makes some statements about her forever mom that are extremely affectionate. She talks about how, she used to put her, her mom let her put her hair in ponytails that summer, and how they played Chinese checkers, and it's a very affectionate, close bond. But when Maura, that's Ginny's, again, forever mother, becomes pregnant with a biological baby, that's when Maura becomes extremely wary of Ginny. And out of necessity, I think, Ginny bonds with her forever dad, who, of course, is a man. And Ginny has issues with men. She has been abused by men in the past. So for her to connect with Brian in that way, her forever dad, is actually quite dramatic. And I hope it comes off as a necessary thing, and I hope Maura is not looked at as, this awful, awful person.
Well, it's understandable, but she does get kind of mean at some point,
Yeah, she does. Yeah, I like to use the word protective.
Okay, that is true.
Ginny gets a little freaky.
Yeah, yes,
yeah,
Ginny.
That's the intention, anyway.
But because the book is told from Ginny's point of view, it's written in first person. And it's very much inside Ginny's head. So we really are getting her point of view on things, aren't we?
Oh, definitely. And one of the fun things for me, as the crafter of this very long narrative, was to be able to present that unreliable narrator as we. This person who is absolutely convinced she's telling the whole story, the whole truth, but you can tell by the way she says things and the way other people react and the way the world really responds just physically to what she does. She's not in touch with the whole truth and nothing but the truth. There are many other stories in this book, and I hope the reader is able to glimpse some of those sort of secret plot lines that are going on in the background that Ginny just doesn't see.
You know, that's interesting that I hadn't really thought about her as an unreliable narrator, but of course she very much is. And that's another one of these sort of, I don't know what you say. I don't want to say, there's a word for it, that elements of fiction or I'm thinking contrivances, but it's not contrivance, but it's something that you use to, a way to tell a story in fiction, the unreliable narrator, that is talked about a lot in writing classes, but it's sometimes a little harder to imagine how you'd actually use that.
Yeah, and that's part of the delight, I think, of writing from the first-person perspective. I think, and I tell students this all the time, every first-person narrator is an unreliable narrator in that he or she is going to be operating from a very particular set of biases, a very particular set of beliefs, a very particular set of perceptions even. And, no two people on the planet see the same thing the same way. So to present that perspective, that very unique Ginny perspective, if you will, and then have it ricochet and bounce off all these other perceptions in the book is just intensely fun.
Wow. You're listening to Writers' Voices with Monica and Caroline, and our guest today is Benjamin Ludwig, author of Ginny Moon, a novel. How long did you work on this book, Benjamin?
All right, how long? Depends which part is work and which part isn't. But I started writing in 2013.
Okay.
And it took about 9 months to finish the first draft. And that for me felt very quick. Because Ginny's voice just really came fully formed and so forcefully. After that, I let it sit for I couldn't let it sit too long. She was too compelling, probably about a month, and started revising. Writers have to revise. If you put a story down and look at it again after a certain length of time, it's really not the same story you envisioned or that you remember writing. And inevitably, the one you remember writing is stronger than already on the page. So it took about a good, maybe half a year, another 6 months to revise. And after that, I sent it out to several agents. And so this is somewhere in 2014. And one responded immediately to the sample pages I had sent him, and he asked to read the whole book, and he did. He read it in one day, which was amazing.
Wow.
And then he called the next day and offered to work with me. So that's about how long it took. A bit over, maybe a year and a half, I'd say.
Well, that is quite a great story, particularly that the first batch of inquiries you sent out, you landed an agent immediately.
Yeah, I hear it doesn't happen every day, so I just try to keep my head down and keep working, keep moving forward, and don't think about it too much, because it was a bit of a whirlwind, to be quite honest.
Yeah. When you were writing, to do this first draft in 9 months, and this is a fairly substantial book. Like I said, it's a long story. Were you totally involved in her world where it was hard to get back into your own?
Now, and I'll tell you, Monica, the most frustrating thing, which turned out to be the most wonderful thing after I got my brain around it, was that Ginny would wreck my outline. So that first night when I came home from Special Olympics basketball practice with my daughter, and when I started writing from Ginny's perspective, I knew this was something I'd never had before. This was a narrator. This was a story that really just gripped me, really gripped my heart. So I wrote from that perspective for a few hours that evening and came back the next day, read it over, couldn't believe how exciting it still felt. That's always a good sign. So I sat down and wrote an outline for the rest of the book, thinking, I got to be smart. I can't just go into this blindly. I need to know where this character came from and where she's headed, and then ultimately what happened. So I wrote this outline, and then next day, I came back again to my desk and started writing the second scene, and Ginny refused to comply with what the second scene said. I with. So she just had this other idea, and oh man, so she just kept going, and she did that for almost the whole time I was writing. Like I said, initially it was really frustrating because I thought, she's going to wreck the book. She's this train wreck of a kid, and she has these plans that just won't jive with, this greater, carefully balanced narrative thing that I've created. But within a week or two, it became very clear that her ideas were so much better than mine. So I just let her go, not that I had much of a choice. 9 months later, finished book.
So and I don't want to give away anything, so I'm going to be a little careful in how I word this. But, Ginny Moon it's obviously very character-driven, but it has a fairly strong narrative arc, fairly strong plot. Did you know what that was going to be from, you said you wrote an outline, but that she kept wrecking it, but the overall narrative arc, did you know that from the beginning, or did that come as you wrote?
Like I said, I thought I did. I wrote so many outlines for this book because she kept, just dashing them all to pieces. So I thought I knew the narrative arc. Probably, I want to say maybe 7 months in. Probably 7 months out of the 9.
Wow.
I was able to stand back and say, okay, this kid has done this, and this. There's really only 2 directions she can go in. And at that point, she stopped wrecking my outlines.
Okay.
Because there was enough of a baseline, if you will. There was enough of a structure that she built that I could kind of see where the rest of it was going.
Right, right.
Yeah, but until the very last 2 entries, I really didn't know exactly how the story would end. I knew it was, there were 2 possibilities, A and B, and she picked B.
Wow. So you didn't know the truth about what was driving her until fairly far along.
Oh yeah, I did not know that. Did not know that. But and that was, man, I tell people I hope I can pull this off in the book I'm working on now, which is a very different book. But she left clues that I didn't think were clues initially. She would, and like you said, it's hard without giving it away.
Right,
but
right.
She would say things that became a pattern. She'd keep referring to the same ideas or the same events and same places over and over again, and I'd say to myself, something's going on here. Something happened in this place, or something happened with this particular character's name. But I don't know what it is yet. So I just let that pattern keep developing. And eventually she kind of blurted out the big spoiler, which turned out to be the big reveal in real-time writing.
Right.
So I really didn't plan those. So I'm so excited that it happened, because I know it's a mysterious thing, and like I said, really hope I can pull it off again. Well,
the thing that's so interesting is that big reveal, kind of the plot twist, actually occurs pretty far from the end. You've probably got a third of the book left after that.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. It's not something that's left until the end, and the reason for that, I think, here I am trying to explain the mysterious process, but as a writer, I learned very early on in just writing short stories that you can't hold something back on purpose from a reader. If there is a secret, and you as the reader, or you as the writer know what it is, you really are, I think you're obligated to just spill it. If you know a big secret, tell it, because ultimately that's going to be the thing that makes the reader turn the page and be excited for whatever happens next. Now, that is a difficult thing to do for me, and I think for a lot of writers, because you have this sense of, well, what if I don't know what to say next? What if I don't know what comes next? And that's the part where you really have to trust your own unconscious. You have to trust the creative process to give you more, even though you think you've just given it all away.
Wow. Right, because even when, it could have been, this is why she's been acting this way. Now everybody understands everything. Everything's going to turn out fine. But that's not what happened at all. This is Writer's Voices with Monica and Caroline, and our guest today is Benjamin Ludwig, author of Ginny Moon. So Ginny has a very particular way of talking, of speaking. And when we talked about, her voice, obviously this is what comes through, and you convey it in certain ways. One is a certain repetitiveness. She uses the same words over and over again, and almost an obsessive repetitiveness in some cases. And you use italics a lot to emphasize these words that really mean something to her. Was that something that just came naturally?
That was something that came from just having children of my own and teaching all sorts of kids. Children, when they're acquiring language, they are actively grabbing new vocabulary terms and misusing them until they get them right. And it's a wonderful learning process, and adults do it too. We just try to be cool about it, I think. But Ginny, in particular, she's been through a lot of situations that other children would not have been through. A good example is therapy sessions. Ginny has seen multiple therapists and social workers, so she's learned some important terms like de-escalate. She's learned the term. Oh boy, I'm blanking now that I try to think of it. But she's learned a lot of therapy terms that a professional would use to help a person cope or deal with various circumstances. And once she learns one of those words, she tries to use it. It creeps into her vocabulary, not on purpose sometimes, but she's aware that it's a different sort of word than that she would pick on her own. So that's why those terms are italicized throughout the book.
Mm. Benjamin, why don't you read a little bit from Ginny Moon, because I really want our listeners to get an idea of her voice.
Oh, sure. Perfect. Yeah. All right. I'm going to read a section, if anyone's interested, on page 48, just a few pages long. And just to give you some context, Ginny, in the beginning of the book, is desperately, she's set off. She's sort of set on fire, if you will, by this idea of finding her way back to her birth mother's apartment. And she doesn't know where her birth mother lives. Ginny was taken from her birth mother at an early age. She has no memory of the name of the town and no way to contact her except through the Internet. But she's not allowed to use the Internet. Her adoptive parents won't let her. So at school, she breaks some rules and gets online and manages to find her mother's blog. And this is a scene where she's already reached out to her mother, and now she's trying to do so a second time. But here we go. The entry begins 11:32 in the morning, Monday, September 13th. In science, we are studying hurricanes. I am working with Allison Hill on our project. We have to make a poster and write a report about how hurricanes work. We have to type a list of facts, too. But my job is to make the poster. Mrs. Wake is helping me put dots of glue on a big piece of white poster board so that I can attach cotton balls to it. I'm not allowed to use the glue because Ms. Dana told her what happened last year when I memorized the combination to the supply cabinet in room 5. But in a minute, I'm going to need the glue. It's part of my secret plan. That's very good, Ginny, Mrs. Wake says. Now let's put some on the bands of clouds on the outside of the hurricane. Those outer winds are the most destructive, so we need to make sure they stand out. I put 2 more cotton balls on the poster board. Allison Hill is near the window at a long table typing the list of facts. Allison Hill is good at typing. She is faster than Larry and faster than me, but she gets really mad sometimes when you try to make her go as fast as she can. I put down the cotton ball I am holding. Allison Hill, are you done yet? I ask. Not yet, Ginny, she says. I look at my watch. The time is 11:35. I put my pencil down on the table hard so that it makes a slap. Then I make a loud breathing sound. Allison Hill keeps typing. I pick up the scissors and start cutting out the curved arrows that Mrs. Wake drew for me. I make the breathing sound again. I am almost ready for those facts, I say. Allison Hill slams her hands down on the keyboard. Ginny, leave me alone. Ginny, says Mrs. Wake. But her voice didn't go up, so she wasn't asking a question. I bet the facts would be done if Larry was typing, I say. Then Allison Hill throws her paper and pencil in the air and stands up. I look at her. She has her fingers curled up like claws. Mrs. Wake walks over to her and starts to de-escalate the situation. They start talking loud and fast. So I grab the glue and squeeze it all over Mrs. Wake's chair. I squeeze and I squeeze and I squeeze. Then I put the bottle on the ground and move it under the table with my foot where she can't see it. When Mrs. Wake is finished helping Allison Hill calm down, she comes back to help me some more. She sits. Let's let Allison get her work done, she says. Don't talk to her right now. She needs to focus. So I say, I can't find the glue. Mrs. Wake looks around. It was here just a minute ago, she says. Ginny, did you eat the glue? Ms. Dana said. Then she gets a funny look on her face and puts her hand under her bottom. I make sure my mouth is closed. Did you do this, she says, and stands up. She is wearing a nice gray skirt. She tries to look at her bottom, but her neck isn't long enough, so she puts her hand there instead. She looks at her hand. She looks at me. Her eyes get big and wet. Ginny, I can't believe you, she says. Then she runs out of the library. I start moving towards the computer where Allison Hill is working. Then I remember that Allison Hill knows I'm not allowed to use the Internet without an adult. I stop and start picking at my fingers. On the other side of the library, I see a fifth grader get up from a computer. I walk to the place where he was sitting and sit down in his place. Then I type mannequin.com into the white space at the top of the screen and click Enter. On the screen, I see Maine Coon cats. I see their long ears and bushy tails. Their faces look at me like fires and coke heads. Above them, I see tabs that say information and about me and contact me. And I see the words, a message for my daughter. Under the words, a message for my daughter, I read. So I came to the address you gave me, and those SOBs called the police. But they can't shut me down. I have rights, too, I told them. No one can take away freedom of speech. 4 years ago, they took you away, and I've been trying to find you ever since. Thank God for the Internet. Don't tell anyone about this blog, though. I can't come back to the house where you live because the judge issued a restraining order. Jin, I love you so much. I want you back so we can be a family again. Do you have any idea how hard it's been without you? I'll do anything to get you back. You should see the new cages I put in. We're moving lots of tail. I'm clean now, too. Rehab and everything. Crystal says I should lie low and cool it, but I can't cool it. She helped me out a lot after you left, but I have to see you. So name the time and place, and I'll be there. Leave a comment, and as soon as I read it, I'll delete it. Ha! That almost rhymes. Mm-hmm. I don't know what leave a comment means, but then I see the word comment under Gloria's letter. So I click it, and I see a place to type. I write, you can come to the Harvest concert on October 18th. Please get my baby doll from the suitcase under my bed. Don't leave it there alone. Then I click the word submit, which I'm guessing is like send, and then the X to make the screen go away, and I go back to the table to wait.
And Ginny is how old here?
She's 14.
She's 14. You know, she's obviously a handful.
She is a bit of a handful, yeah. Some might say a hurricane.
Some might. And so, in a way, you can't really blame her forever mom from getting a little protective and a little scared. And I'm wondering what motivates people to adopt a child like Ginny. It must be really challenging.
Yeah, it must be. I mean, like I said a little bit earlier, our daughter is so nice. Writing this book gave me a lot of appreciation for how nice and wonderful and innocent our daughter really is. When I was at a lot of those Special Olympic basketball practices that I mentioned earlier, I sat with parents of kids who had, lots of disabilities, intellectual and physical. But I also sat with foster and adoptive parents who had done something similar to what my wife and I had done, which is adopt a child with special needs. But the stories that I could tell about my daughter were nothing compared to the level of difficulty that some of these other foster and adoptive parents experience. Our daughter's background is not nearly as troubled as some of the experiences these other kids have gone through. I think, and I don't think, I know, I was definitely inspired to write a horrific background for Ginny based on talking to a lot of the parents at these Special Olympics events.
Oh. I just have to really admire people because, if you are adopting or even fostering a child with that kind of background, it's going to absorb your whole life, really.
Oh, you bet. You bet. These poor people, sometimes sometimes they end up seeing therapists themselves to keep things all working properly. My wife and I wanted to adopt a teenager, but we didn't want to adopt someone who, came from the most troubled past imaginable. But that's exactly what a lot of foster parents really do. These people are saints in a lot of ways, if you will. I don't like to, put myself in that category because, like I said, we got an easy case. But there are people who go for the most difficult cases, and wow, they are amazing people.
But even so, you didn't know you were going to get an easy case. How could you know?
Well,
you had fostered.
When you adopt a child, you have to choose the child, of course.
Right. Right.
And you look through so many documents and portfolios and folders for each child, and you really do. You don't know 100% of what happened to the child, but you know enough to know why the child was taken from birth father or birth mother's home. You know how many schools they've been through, how many placements, what treatments they've received, because social services really does want you to know what you're getting yourself into, so that unlike the poor Moon family in the book, you don't end up with this giant secret history that no one could possibly have known about, including the authorities themselves.
Wow. Of course, even when you raise a child from birth, you don't know there's things that you don't know that can happen, that they can turn out in a way that you have no way of knowing.
Yeah, you bet. And kids do things. I did some interesting things when I was a teenager that I'm sure my parents weren't pleased with.
Yeah,
to say the least. I think we all have. But just because you have a biological child doesn't mean this is going to be easy.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Now, one of the Ginny's birth mom raised Maine Coon cats, and you referred to that a little bit in the section that you were reading. Is this something that you have always had an interest in?
Not at all. I'm from New Hampshire, and Maine is like, a rock's throw away, and so I think there are a lot of people here who have Maine Coon cats as pets, but I'm honestly not interested in Maine Coon cats or cats at all, to tell you the truth. But what interested me about Maine Coon cats was just a little tidbit I heard in an eighth grader's science report about 10 years ago. I remember I was teaching public middle school, and the student was giving a little speech and had a big poster, actually very much like Ginny's hurricane poster, but the young lady was giving a presentation, and she said that Maine Coon cats, researchers think it might be the case that Maine Coon cats are actually a blend of domesticated cats and bobcats.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if that's true or not, but I thought, wow, that's really cool. Because Gloria and also Ginny herself in the book, again, Gloria is Ginny's birth mother. These are people who, in a lot of ways, are regular, everyday people, but they have these wild, unpredictable sides. And I thought it would be neat to have Gloria, sell and raise and admire an animal that is part calm and part wild at the same time.
Interesting. You're listening to Writers' Voices with Monica and Caroline, and our guest today is Benjamin Ludwig, author of Ginny Moon. So, Benjamin, you mentioned that the first draft took about 9 months to write, and which is fast. for a book of this size, and particularly, I'm assuming you had a day job and you had family obligations. So, what was your writing schedule like?
Well, my writing schedule then is what it is still now, and it's not the most pleasant one, but like I say, you get used to it. I get up very early in the morning. I burn the candle at both ends, as they say. And in the morning, I'm up at 3:30.
Oh my gosh!
I have two little kids, ages 3 and 7, and they're up usually right before 6 o'clock. Ready to go off to school and play or whatever, have breakfast. And so I don't have a lot of time during the day to write. So most of my writing time is early in the morning. When I'm not teaching right now, but when I was teaching, I would use my lunch breaks to write. I would use a prep period to write. Most public school teachers, if they're fortunate, get one prep period per day, and you're supposed to plan lessons and grade papers. But I would write because it was just a convenient time. And then I would do most of my schoolwork after supper, and then inevitably before going to bed, I would spend another good half hour to an hour. So in a given day, I would kind of steal about 4 to 5 hours
wow.
of time, and it's you have to realize it's an addiction. I mean, you get really into the story, even if it's not as intense as Ginny. All the other books I've written in a similar way. A story gets its hooks into you, and in a way, it becomes part of your balance, part of your own psychology. So you need to work through the difficult parts. You can't let them sit there because they'll drive you crazy. And when the story itself is at not a lull, but it's at a non-active point, you get bored and antsy, or at least I do. And I want to push the action forward so that we're into the next downhill slide.
Wow. So you've been writing like this even before Ginny, then, spending that time every day?
Definitely. Yeah.
Wow.
I started teaching in 1997. 1997 is when I graduated in May, and then in September started teaching full-time public school in Amesbury, Massachusetts, actually. Since I had more time in the early days because I wasn't married and I didn't have children, and certainly wasn't a foster parent yet, so I had a lot more time. And I do think I learned more in the early days just because I could.
Wow. So I'm just wondering, what kept you going with that kind of schedule year after year after year? Did you try and publish any of those earlier books?
Oh, yeah, all of them. You bet. I tried to publish every single one, and it doesn't take too many. When you query an agent, you don't just query one; you query a whole bunch, cast a wide net, if you will. And if you query 100 different people, if you reach out to 100 different publishing professionals who could potentially try to sell your book or actually publish it if they're editors, if 100 of them don't write back, or if you get 70 rejection letters in return, maybe it's time to stop trying to get that piece published and maybe work on something else, or maybe try to change it and improve it. So that's what I did, so many times.
Wow. You didn't get discouraged?
Well, no, because it's weird because now, like, writing is my job. Like, I get paid to do this, so it seems like it's different now. But back then, when I wasn't published, it was something. It was like breathing or eating. Like you have to do this. I had to do it, and I wasn't going to necessarily get something out of it other than the action itself. I wanted to get published. I did aggressively pursue it, but when it didn't happen, I knew there would be another book. I knew there would be another round of submissions, if you will. So I just kept going, and it really does become your lifestyle. And once you're hooked on it, I think most writers will agree. When you're really hooked on writing, no amount of rejection is going to stop you, because you're not. That's acceptance. Publication is not the only goal. That's part, but it's really the psychology, the process of writing itself is addicting and gratifying all at once.
Wow. When did Ginny Moon actually get published?
May 2nd, yeah. Well,
Wow.
May 1st, the first few books were sold. The publisher was gracious and allowed us to have a launch party on May 1st at Water Street Books in Exeter, New Hampshire, which is very close to my home. But then on May 2nd, I was on the road on my book tour, and that's when it was really starting to hit the stands, and I got to see it in the airport.
Oh, awesome. And
it was something.
Okay, but you said that this is now a full-time job for you. So that's
yeah.
That's pretty
it really
fast.
Had to be. Let's see. We got when did it all happen? All right, so 2017 is what it is. May 2017, the book was released, and it takes 18 months to get a book from contract to on the shelf.
Right.
And the publisher needs that much time to build publicity and work through marketing campaigns and get covers ready. And there's so many things. It's wonderful and overwhelming. But when I first got the publishing contract, there wasn't a ton for me to do right away. There were emails and calls, and there was a trip to New York, but it wasn't a full-time thing. But I quickly realized, as I started to look at future travel schedules, that I would need to take a whole month off from work in the month of January, 4 weeks, in order to do what we call a pre-pub tour, when you go out and you talk to librarians, which is so cool, by the way, and bookstore owners, so that they know there's a book coming out, and that there is something they could potentially order and recommend to their patrons and clients. But that was a full month, and then I saw roughly the same time that there would be a publication tour, and that's what I just finished, and that would take another month. So I sat down with my building principal at the middle school where I worked. I said, Kim, what do you think? Can I do this? And she said, well, I think it's great, but I'm not in charge. You have to ask the superintendent. So I wrote to the superintendent, and I said, I'm going to be gone for 2 months out of a 9-month school year. Is that okay? I said, I'm sorry. She said, I'm sorry, it's not. So it was leave or stay, and this was a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I resigned my position.
Wow. I think they should have given you maternity leave.
I was hopeful because the book is really like your baby.
Yeah.
I'm Ginny's mom.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I had hoped for a leave of absence, but, I think the nature of public school is such that as much as you might love a teacher, the needs of the students have to come first. And they needed someone who they knew was going to stay and who could be there and was fully committed and fully focused, and that person just wasn't going to be me unless I chose to stay. So there you have it.
But, after this was done, you could have gone back the next year or gotten...
Not to the same district.
Not
unless
to the same
okay. my previous position is officially taken and has been for some time now.
Okay.
But I would have to apply for a new position. My hope right now is to take this current year and finish my second book. And at the same time, I'm going to be looking for university creative writing positions because I'm a teacher at heart. As much as I'm a writer, I've been teaching, it feels like forever. And I really don't know how to live without teaching, so I am eager to get back to it.
That makes sense, and probably with the university schedule, you might have more flexibility.
I hope so.
For book tours and so forth.
Because it was rough.
Oh yeah.
The work of I was a public school language arts teacher in a middle school, and language arts teachers, every teacher has a lot of work to do, but the language arts teacher brings home journals, essays, and writing workshop pieces. And the amount, to teach writing and to teach reading in a meaningful, helpful way, it requires an immense amount of time. It's not a matter of this is right, this is wrong. In the old days, the way math papers were corrected, you just have a list of the right answers and check or X. Teaching writing has never been like that. It's an engaging, communicative process, and that just takes time.
So, yeah, I think maybe a university schedule might be a little bit more conducive to the life of a novelist.
Now, is Ginny Moon considered a young adult novel?
No, actually,
No.
it's considered an adult novel.
Okay.
Now, having said that, the publisher is very much aware that there's a ton of crossover. You know,
Right,
a lot of adults
right.
read young adult novels, and a lot of young adults. I did myself. You know, in high school, will read very high level adult books.
Right.
So there is crossover. Right now, the book has been aimed at or marketed at adults, but we absolutely hope that it'll get into the hands of young people. I think it's good for high school audiences. I don't think middle schoolers should be reading it. I think it's a bit too dark
intense.
at times for
Yeah,
them.
a little bit too intense. Also, might give them some ideas.
Don't try this at home, kids, please.
Yeah, really.
No running away.
It certainly, I think, is something that a high school kid could read. Do you feel like that this that Ginny Moon gives people who maybe aren't around kids who are on the spectrum an idea of what it's like? Because not just Ginny, but some of the other kids in her class and in her Special Olympics team. Do you think it can help people learn what that's like?
I do. One of the things that I'm most interested in a writer is voice and the importance of acknowledging different voices, whether they're just plain different from yours or really quiet, as Ginny can be. You know, Ginny really has two voices in the book. She's got that interior voice, which is just verbose and pushy, and then her exterior voice, the voice she speaks with, is so staccato and short. But I do hope that another benefit or another result of people reading this book is that they start to look at different perspectives and maybe what it's like not to have as many options, you know, as they have. I mean, Ginny's a kid who can't sit down and read a book at the same level that most readers who are reading about Ginny Moon can sit down and read. What's it like to be in a brain like that, a brain that functions in a fundamentally different way? I hope very much that readers take that away from the book.
One thing I found really amusing about Ginny is she actually has a very high code of behavior, a very strict code of behavior. She has her own moral code. Part of it is that you don't tell lies with your mouth.
Right. Right. So that would be wrong.
Yes, that would be wrong. But you can, but as long as you're not using words, it's kind of okay to lie.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
that's the literal, almost mathematical way of using language, which is a trait that Ginny has. Certainly not all people on the spectrum think this way. I need to make that clear to folks who aren't familiar with spectrum disorders. But Ginny takes things completely literally. So she at some point, I'm imagining here, she at some point was told, it's wrong to tell a lie, the operative word meaning being tell. So in Ginny's way of thinking literally, well, I'm not going to tell a lie, and the only way to tell something is with your mouth. So there's all sorts of other things that I now have access to that might involve giving a different impression or twisting the truth. But as long as I'm not using my mouth, because that's how you tell things, then it's okay.
Right.
This is a strict interpretation of the Constitution.
So, Benjamin, with your new book that you're working on now, did the idea or the concept for this book come to you as, with such force as Ginny?
It kind of did, but not in the same time-sensitive way. Like I can actually look in my journal, my writing journal, and point to the moment when Ginny's voice first came to be. This other book is something that's been brewing in me for a while, And it's a different kind of intensity. It's the kind of intensity that won't go away. Usually with a book, when I start working on it, I know I'm going to come work on my project every day, but there are many days when, I set the time aside, I get up to do the work, and something else, some other writing project catches my attention, and I'll work on that instead. That didn't happen with Ginny, and with this book, there's this idea that I just kept coming back to that would insert itself into my normal morning or even afternoon writing times. So it's sort of like the inverse of Ginny, but the same. No, not the same at all. It's like the inverse of Ginny, but not the opposite.
And it's a novel, also.
It is a novel. It's I can't say a lot about it because it's in the works, and things change when they're in the works.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not about a person who's on the spectrum. It's about a little boy who grows up on a farm, and I can tell you that he becomes a poet by the time the book is over.
Ah, and so is it also a character-driven novel?
Oh, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, it's. I'd like to say voice-driven.
Voice-driven?
Voice is. It's really all I care about in writing. If I can get voice for a character, if I can identify the voice and live in the voice and reproduce the voice that this character possesses, that this character is really, then the structure of the story will present itself out of that voice. The plot twists even will present themselves out of the way a voice is put together. Because why do people talk the way they talk? We have this idea that there's a Southern accent, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, there's like 70,000 Southern accents, and even if you took one regional Southern accent and went into one particular family, you would discover that each family member uses that accent differently. So as a writer, my question is always, why does this person say whatever she's saying, however she's saying? And it doesn't have to do with that accent idea or that regional thing, but the particular circumstances that person has been through, which really becomes the backstory for the book.
Now with Ginny, because she was abused and is on the spectrum, is kind of a unique character where her voice is, it's sort of obvious that her voice is going to be very different than yours or mine. Mm-hmm. Is it harder to do voice when you're doing a character that's more kind of normal?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, if I write if I write with my own voice, I'll be bored. Because I'm not terribly interested in myself at all, or I wouldn't be writing. If I only wanted to write for my own person, oh my goodness, I'd write for 2 minutes and I'd be done. Because I think readers too, they want to go out on that adventure and see that new place and do that new thing and talk with that new person. Someone
who's a little different.
I think that's why voice is so important. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. So now that writing's kind of your full-time job, do you have a lot more free time?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
You would.
You'd think so. Okay. I do have more free time, but it's not as much as I had hoped. So I'm writing full time, and what that means is writing in the morning, and then my kids get up, and then I bring my first grader to school because my wife goes off to work. She's a computer scientist at the University of New Hampshire. But I'm daddy daycare for a 3-year-old.
Ah, okay.
My 3-year-old boy is not in daycare or in preschool, so I'm with him all day. And he does nap once, which is great. But he's basically up running around ragtagging it all day. And I write when I can. But
can you write when he's awake? Will he give you? I mean, because you can't write 5 minutes at a time. You need at least 10 or 15.
Right. Yeah, he doesn't give me prolonged time. Absolutely not. He's not going to give me if I get a half hour, it's because he's at a doctor's appointment with my wife or something.
Oh, okay.
But what you mentioned 5 minutes. You'd be surprised what you can do in 5 minutes. You can't write paragraphs. I can't anyway. I can't write through a particular voice perspective in 5 minutes. But I walk around with notepads all over the house and several computers. And my phone even, which is always with me. And I'm constantly writing down things a character might say or different ideas for what a character might do. And I have several what I call master documents that are really outlines for different projects. And it takes 2 seconds to open up, an iPad and boom, 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 type what you have to type and then walk away. So it's kind of like I'm writing as I'm living. But no, it's not that prolonged. Let's create a whole chapter this morning experience, which is really what I need for next year. Our 3-year-old will turn 4 this summer, and he's going to go to preschool. Get a whole lot of work done.
Oh yeah. Now, do you like writing by hand?
I don't. I lost that ability a long time ago, and I'm embarrassed by it. But having taught, and I see that the kids are cursive was the first to go. People stopped teaching.
I know.
Stopped teaching cursive.
I know.
And so a lot of adults lost their ability to write cursive. I was taught to write cursive from the get-go, and I really can't do it anymore except to sign my name. But when I was in high school, I took some typing classes, and I was like Allison Hill,
Oh, wow.
I was really fast.
Wow.
And but maybe not that fast. That's pretty quick. But I learned that I could type a lot faster than I could write by hand.
Plus, you can read it when you're done, which I can write by hand, but you just can't read it. So, Benjamin, we're out of time, but it's been such a pleasure talking to you and talking about Ginny. This is a wonderful book. It's a great read. You really, once you start it, you got to know what happened. So that's it for today. Usually Caroline gives us a quote. I'm going to, in her stead, give us a little Mark Twain quote. If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. So see you next week on Writers' Voices.